Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar sponsored by Ark Site. My name is Chad. I'll be your moderator today. We have a great topic that we're going to be talking about today. Specifically, we're going to be referring to the 5 mistakes that can sink your fencing business and how to address these mistakes and make sure that you don't make them. This will be relevant for you whether you're just getting started in the fencing business or you're a seasoned pro. You'll likely find a lot of use of the data and information that we'll be sharing with you today. Before we get started, I just wanted to go through a couple of housekeeping details. For one, you'll notice on the right side of your window here that there is a chat box. If at any time during today's webinar you have any questions, comments, concerns, or issues, feel free to type them in there. We'll be manning the chat and answering as many questions as we can while we're live. However, if we don't get to all of them, we will follow up with you through email afterwards to answer those questions. We will also be popping up a couple of polls throughout today's webinar. Feel free to take those polls. They're just a way for our presenters to get to know who's in the webinar a little bit better and for us to understand your situation a little better. Also, on the right side, there is a Handouts tab. If you click on that Handouts tab, we've uploaded a number of super helpful resources for you that coincide with the details of today's webinar, as well as some other resources that are really going to help out your fencing business. So feel free to download those. They are completely free and they're there at your disposal for any use that you'd like. That out of the way, I want to introduce our host today. Justin Judy will be our moderator. Justin is our partner manager here at Ark Site. He manages all of our partnerships, our integrations. You probably saw him if you were at Fence Tech, and you've probably seen him in a number of our other fencing resources. Justin is one of our top fencing experts. So with that said, Justin, I'm going to pass it off to you and let you introduce our special guests today. Thanks so much.
Of course. Thanks, Chad. Appreciate the intro. Yeah, with me today, we've got 2 people who really don't need much of an introduction. If you're in fencing, you probably know both of them already. We have Tony Thornton joining us as the owner of the Thornton Fence Consulting Group, and then Joe Everest, host and 3rd-generation fencer of the Fence Expert Show. How are you guys doing this morning? Or this afternoon?
Doing great.
And they flew.
Yeah, they all blur together.
Doing great. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Good. Yeah. So these guys are going to be here today to really provide the expert knowledge and resources. I'm going to be just more keeping us on task and moving things along. And you'll see a lot of really helpful conversations come up throughout the day. And if at any time, like Chad said, shoot questions off to the right and we'll do our best to handle those in real time. And without any further ado, we'll just move forward with it. So we'll start off with our first topic. And our first topic is a mistake we see a lot of people make. A lot of you guys are really good at building fence and you're really good at selling fence and understanding things like that. But the ignorance of basic business principles can really sink a business quick and or prevent it from growing to the level it could. So Tony, if you don't mind, I'd like to just kind of start with you and kind of hear your thoughts on maybe some of the stuff you've seen in the industry around the ignorance of basic business principles and what the effects you've seen it have on fencing businesses nationwide.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a great topic. And I do believe that this is one of the major mistakes that a lot of our fence professionals make. We can be the best craftsman, the best installer, be as efficient as we can with all of those components. And then we say, the boss looks like he's making all the money. I need to start my own company. And then within a couple of years, due to the lack of the business principles, the lack of knowing their financials, the lack of really knowing how to run the business, they get themselves in trouble, and now they're saying, "Oh wow, I see why the boss was the boss," right? So I do believe that this is one of the most important pieces of especially a young company getting started to really know what they need to know when they get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, do you have anything you want to really kind of tack on here? Some excerpts from the ebook that we wrote recently have things around these sort of topics. I don't want to read them list by list, but I'd love to kind of hear any kind of expounding information you guys have around, some advice to help people not make that mistake.
Yeah, I echo Tony's sentiments here that, a lot of guys are great and gals are great at the hands-on aspect of building fence. I mean, we see folks that are incredible craftsmen at craftspeople at their, at building fence. But running a business and building a fence are 2 wildly different things. And to Tony's point, so they'll go out on their own and they'll start the business, but then there's all these extra things that come along with running a business that no one really, before recently really talked about. And so they get in over their head and they burn through whatever savings they had. And then at some point, there is a decision made that we can't afford to do this anymore. we gotta close this shop up. And unfortunately, the fencing industry then loses that professional, right? They're so disenfranchised with the whole situation that they go into a different trade, right? So usually a related trade, but the fencing industry as a whole loses that professional, and is worse for it, right? Because they were great at building fence. They did great work, and they might have been good trainers also. You know, a lot of our key team leaders, that's one of the traits they have, is they are great trainers. So not only do we lose a great professional, but we also lose a great trainer in the profession itself. So the industry becomes worse for this happening.
Let me add to that too, Justin. You know, like what Joe said, you know, that's the practical side. We're good at installing. We're good at doing what we do. And now we're going to run a business. And they've never thought about all the components. And Joe just hit that 10,000 foot elevation. We've got to know what type of business entity we set up. We've got to know what insurances are required. Are we going to do residential and commercial? You know, do we have a residential exclusion in our insurance policy that we know nothing about, but yet we're paying for it? There's so many components of the business aspect. And then when you get into the financial piece, you know, that's where we use the term in our industry quite often, knowing your numbers. Okay. That's where they get in trouble the quickest. Okay. Within 2 years, IRS is, you know, breathing down their throat, you know, whereas my tax money, you didn't pay your taxes on a quarterly time frame. And now it just blows up. And to Joe's point, we lose a good, you know, installer, a good professional, a good practical craftsman, because, you know, he was in a little bit, or she was in a little bit over their head. And I think more education right now in our tenure of time is being done now to try to prevent that than any other time in our industry. And I'm so proud of everybody that's, you know, gathered around, you know, all of these new fence companies and trying to, you know, get them going. Your first bullet point up there on the basic business knowledge is get out of the business to work on the business. You know, and I talk about this quite often in our sessions and things. It's hard for a young entrepreneur that is a practical installer, okay, to work on the business. And the way that I approach that is, okay, set aside 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours a week. You close the door and you work on the business. And then when you start hiring the right resources to give them the responsibilities that you have, okay, then you can work more and more on the business. But it's not going to happen overnight. It's a progression of time. It's a progression of investment. And I mean, we've all been there. I remember in my early career running my own businesses, you know, I'd work all day. I'd go to softball or baseball practice. I'd load my kid up. We'd go run a service call. I'm sure Joe's in that process right now. We do what we have to do to run our business, right? But we do have to work on the business more, you know, to make sure that we're going to have the success that we need.
Well, I think that's a great point.
Absolutely.
In that it is a transition, right? It's not a light switch. You don't show up on Monday morning and say, well, guys, you know, from now on, I'm just working on the business, not in the business. It is an ebb and a flow, right? In that depending on who you have available that week and what's going on. And so some weeks you might work in the business more than on, but then other weeks you need to recognize that and say, okay, so this week I'm going to prioritize working on the business, not in the business. I think that's where I see a lot of folks get caught up is they say, you know, I'm supposed to be working on the business. I'm done working in the business. Like, well, you're never really done in the business. Case in point. So this week here at Ozark Fence, so there's a social media conference over in California. So my sister and then our social team went out to there, but also Holly that runs accounting and payment processing. Her daughter's getting married also in California. So she's gone. And so this week was a lot of me and my dad working in the business, working in the office, making sure payments get processed and quotes get sent out, that sort of thing. Yep. It's an ebb and a flow. And I think the important thing to know is that doesn't change, right? We've been doing this since 1955. And this week I worked in the business most all of the week rather than working on the business.
Yeah. Right. And that's one of the things that leads to your tremendous culture there too, Joe, is that your team knows that like, if they need stuff, you can walk the walk, you can step in, you can do the work, you can cover for them, you can do whatever needs to be done. That business is going to keep humming along. and they can take whatever personal time and stuff they need too. So like you said, it can't be a light switch. Otherwise you're going to get some sort of disenfranchised kind of grumpy people if they just think that you're no longer doing work. So yeah, it can be a bit of a troublesome piece to make that transition. But one of the tips and things we'll talk about later is actually some tips for letting go. So that's something we'll come up to here in a few minutes.
And one thing on this, just before we transition, is this is fine. One benefit that the craftsman has in starting their own business is they have done that. They know what what reasonable expectations are. So I think we need to talk about both sides of the coin, right? Is while there is a lot of business knowledge to get up to speed on, they are already 2 or 3 steps ahead because they have the practical experience. They know realistic expectations. They know, hey, your crew should produce X amount a week. If we're based on my knowledge and of the business, how it physically runs. So they do have that benefit rather than having someone maybe from not in the industry come in and buy into a company or a franchise, whatever it might be. That's one benefit that they do have. So I think we need to talk about both sides in that, there are some pitfalls to avoid, but the craftsman is 2 or 3 steps ahead of someone that hasn't been in the industry.
This is true. And Justin, before you move to the next slide, this basic business knowledge bullet point screen right here, I think is very important. Okay. I could add a few more. I'm sure Joe could add a few more, but if the successful companies, the companies that have had ultimate success, have grown their company, are putting good gross margins and good net profit on the bottom line, they do these 5 things. They work on the business and they know what those ebbs and flows are. Joe almost steal that term, and then the profit loss statements. I tell everybody there's 5 components to that P&L. There's revenue. You better know where your money's coming from. It's cost of goods. That's everything that goes into putting Miss Jones' job in the ground, right? It's the gross margin that comes out of that, okay? And then we got to look at all of our expenses, and we got to look at those line items every month to find out if there's anything that we can cut out. And then there's their net. So there's the 5 components that makes up what I think every business owner needs to be looking at. And from a budgeting standpoint, so many people throw their hands up and put a long arm out to say, no, I don't want to do a budget. It's all right here. And at the end of the day, the successful companies that are truly in October of each year building a budget, I want to grow my company 10%. Oh, you got a comment there. I want to expand. I want to add another branch. If we can do it on paper, we typically can do it in real life. But we've got to look at the cash flow. We've got to look at the revenue. We've got to look at our margins to make sure that we can do that. And then if without a good customer relations, a management system, we're lost. The days of note cards and, pieces of paper stuck in a file over there, those are gone. We've got to do exactly what you said on bullet point number 5 there. And we've got to run our business very lean. We've got to be very efficient. And if we're efficient, we can be profitable. And, we've all preached that for many, many years now. So these 5 bullet points, I think, are some of the best that you could have pulled out.
Yeah, and we pulled them out of the book that's in the handouts tab. So there's that ebook around the 5 mistakes to sync that, you guys contributed to. So I'm glad you guys agree with what you wrote. But yeah, at the end of the day, there's some good knowledge.
Better, right, Joe?
Definitely download those handouts and make sure you're taking a peek at those too. And Joe, you've talked heavily in the past, and I've heard you speak on this and just even mentor people on this, but what are some of the mistakes you see with either not marketing your business effectively or not understanding kind of what goes into the marketing of the business effectively, or more specifically, what I've heard you speak to?
So listen, we're hopefully we're not at the end, but we're in the middle of some really solid economic growth years, right? In that I can't tell you how many folks I talk to about their marketing. They're like, well, my marketing is word of mouth. I'm booked out for a ton of months. I've got all the work I could ever need, and it's just word of mouth. So I don't need to market. And well, there's probably a problem. There's probably a couple problems with that statement in general. But the not marketing, the thing with marketing is, again, so it's not a light switch. You don't simply turn it on and then leads start flowing in that week, right? There is a long plan here, right? So customers need to know, like, and trust you before they start talking about doing business with you. Right. And if you're trying to start that conversation when you need the business, you're already kind of stuck, right? Because this isn't a same week conversation. This is a long tail, multiple months, if done right, conversation to where you need to already be in front of the customer before they need the fence, right? Or before they need the repair. So that when it comes to needing the fence or needing the fence repair, then they know already, hey, I already know somebody. I see their content a lot. I trust them because of the content they're putting out. And I've commented on a few things. They have good engagement. They are real people, not a faceless corporation. I talk a little bit about that when I do give these talks, is that people trust people, right? So when you do business with a person, or you prefer to do business with a person over a faceless corporation, right? It's why influencers exist, right? Because companies, I mean, the example I use is Nike hired Jordan to sell shoes, and he sold a tremendous amount of shoes, because what they learned is people didn't know Nike. They knew Nike, but not well enough to spend a lot of money on shoes and now clothing and apparel and everything else. So they teamed up with Jordan because a lot of people did know him. And so they would do business with the company because of him. So the point I make is I can't afford to hire Jordan, right? He's on something on the terms of like a couple $1 billion is what they've paid him to date. Ozark Fence isn't that well off, right? We're not building that much fence where we go pay a couple billion to an influencer. But that's how I got my start in doing video, is saying, hey guys, I'm Joe Everest with Ozark Fence, and today I want to talk to you about X, Y, and Z. And here's why it's important to you. Regardless of who you do business with, I think it is important that you know this, and this about your next fencing project. The nice thing is I was the only person talking about that, right? And so therefore they started to form a relationship with me. And here's the day it solidified. This is when we were still doing in-person estimates. So it was pre-pandemic. I went and knocked on a lady's door, and she opened the door, and she said, she goes, wait a minute, you're the guy on Facebook. I said, well, yeah. I said, here's the thing, is like, I'm too tight to pay someone to do this stuff for me. And if I did pay someone, they wouldn't look like me. Right. And so we had kind of a laugh, and then we walked around the backyard, and I said, now, Miss Customer, we do things a little bit differently in that we offer a steel post. Even though you're building a wood fence, we offer this steel post. And before I could even get to, and here's why it's important to you, she said, oh yeah, that's where, here's the key phrase, that's where I met you, was you were talking to me about these posts. And then she parroted back to me 2 or 3 things that I talked about in that video about these posts. Impressive. And when I made this video, guys, the video was, here's this post. I like using it regardless of who you choose to build your fence. You should request this post because reason 1, 2, and 3. Right. And because this wasn't a sales pitch. I was wanting her to have a good fence no matter who built it. And I believe that good fence was built with this particular post. Because of that, we built some trust and some rapport. And it's that day that I realized I was not there to sell the fence. She knew me. She knew my company. She knew what I was there to present to her. She'd already done the education portion. I was simply there to provide a budget. So make sure that my budget was within her budget. I was at that point, I was already 2 or 3 steps ahead. And that's where it really clicked. Like, this is important. This is how people are making purchasing decisions now. We're not. And listen, I understand there's a lot of companies that still sell at the dining room table. And that's, if that works, then that works. But what we have found is we actually work on pre-selling the project before we ever talk to the client, because we're putting out videos, because a lot of people don't want to meet with a salesperson at 7 o'clock in the evening. They're eating dinner or they're putting kids to bed, but they will watch a video after the kids are in bed and they've got a few minutes and they're scrolling Facebook, or now it's YouTube, TikTok, wherever, LinkedIn, Nextdoor. They're scrolling these platforms to look for advice. And if we can be there to simply give advice, not sell, hear me when I say that. We are not creating sales messages. We are simply there giving information, becoming educational, partners with this customer. Then we build trust. So when they do need a fence, so when they see a recommendation request on social channels, I think everyone's pretty familiar with this. So it's a Facebook group where someone's saying, hey, I need a fence. Who does this? Now they've thought about, I remember this guy, and he's obsessed with orange, and he makes orange jokes all the time and this and that. Who is that? It's Ozark Fence. And so they see a recommendation request, and they may not have done business with us ever, but they say, hey, you should try Ozark Fence. Da, 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 da. We see this happen a lot, and it's because we're producing video content before we needed it, right? In good years and in bad. We should still keep our foot on the gas. Yep. Now, the nice thing about keeping your foot on the gas is when things start to slow down, which could be now or it could not be now, we started pushing our foot further on the accelerator already, because we can kind of see ahead a little bit and see, maybe we ought to push our foot on the accelerator. If we have too many leads come in, I would rather have that problem than not enough leads come in. So let's push it now. But because we've had our foot on this accelerator for years, we can push it now and it'll respond a little bit quicker, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Justin, let me add something to, we teach this in all of our training. The customer is so educated now because there's this thing called Google, okay? And Google has opened up the threshold of opportunity to find these videos in their particular market, to find what others are doing in other parts of the country. So, our customer is better educated now than they've ever been before, because manufacturers, suppliers, contractors are putting content out there that can really help these customers, decide what they need. Okay. Now, sometimes what they think they need and what they should be doing may be two different things. And that's where the professional fence contractor comes into play. So to Joe's point, we just have to listen. We have to navigate them down the path that's probably best for them, because we're the professional and we know what's best, for their particular market. And we just build that relationship. And it's not about selling it. It's about solving a problem, solving an issue. She says, hey, I just got this new Chihuahua. And immediately we got to put a fence up on the ground, right? I mean, this is a small pup, right? So things like that we got to listen to, and through that process, it's a relationship that you eventually build, and it's a long-term customer that they remember you, and in 20 years when they move, they're going to call you again. So it actually is a reoccurring opportunity, but it's a long-term reoccurring situation when it comes to the marketing aspect of a fence contractor.
Yep. And sometimes people will misconstrue the difference between marketing and branding and all that different stuff. But obviously, like Joe, you have a real powerful brand. Everything's orange. Everyone knows that. When I see you anywhere, I know 100% for sure what you're going to be wearing, or at least the color of it. And that's part of your brand. And, other people have got blue and all these different things that are out there. But I wanted to just kind of talk about a little bit about the agency piece of it. It's something we cover in the ebook, but it's something that also gets discussed, I know, a lot during your summits and educational stuff, Tony. And Joe, you kind of talked about what's important for owners to do when choosing or working with an agency. Do you guys kind of remind us, because a lot of our people listening probably don't have a marketing agency, or they should have one? Like, what advice can you give those guys when it comes to choosing one, working with one, knowing what to look out for? I just know that's a question we field quite often, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about it.
I think it's the same as we're saying, when we're saying the craftsman has a leg up because they've done it, they know what the proper expectations are. I think the same thing applies to marketing. They need to do it. They need to get in it, and they need to have at least a basic understanding of what the results should look like and what results they should expect in general. So the example I use is, so I live in the suburb of Springfield, Missouri, Southwest Missouri. Well, I see Facebook advertisements all the time for fencing contractors in Texas and in California and North Carolina and all over the place, and I wonder how much of this is, now it very well could be the contractors doing it themselves and learning it, which is great, right? That needs to happen. But part of me wonders how much of this is an agency that is showing results of, well, your post got so many thousand views and it reached tens of thousands of people. That is a result, but is that the result you're looking for, right? So by getting in and doing it, you understand, you're like, wait, okay, but how many of those people were in my market? Can we talk about the geographic restrictions you put on the post? Can we talk about, and also, we understand that I can't pay my bills with views, with page views, or I can't take that and pay my light bill or anything. I need business. So we need to kind of work our way down the funnel. We're not looking for views. We're looking for engagement is a good starting point, conversions, that sort of thing. But we know that because we work in it, right? Because we know when you see, hey, your post got 10,000 views the first day. Wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. My market's, 500,000 people, so 10,000 people the first day. That sounds like it's being shown to other markets besides mine. But so the advice is get involved with it, get into it yourself, get your feet wet and your hands dirty a little bit to know what the proper expectations are for when you do interview an agency. That is there are some great agencies out there. I don't want to try to throw shade on agencies in general, but I think we can also understand that there are good and bad actors in whatever industry we look at, right? And we need to know the difference between the two, and I think that's by using it.
And, regardless of what partnership you're dealing with, whether it be an agency for marketing and sales or other things, or financial or whatever, talk to other companies that are about your size, get their input that's really doing a good job with that. Set up a list of expectations that when you're talking to these marketing agencies about what I'm looking for, and this is what I'm expecting, because if you can set up the expectation, you can hold it accountable. Now, after 6 months, if they're not hitting the marks that you expected and those type of things, then it may be time to look for another agency, right? Or pull the reins in, whatever you've got to do to make sure, again, if you just give them full thread to just go do what they want to, they're going to give you some results, but in the end, like Joe said, the results may not be in your particular market, and that's fluff. That's not meat and potatoes.
Just a pure waste of investment. And that comes back to what Joe talked about with the craftsman. Like a craftsman can go out and inspect a fence. They'll know if that fence was built right. They'll know if that gate was hung and supported correctly. They'll know if, the wood gate rails were built the right way. They'll know that sort of stuff. But that same craftsman typically doesn't know how to double check their marketing agency. So definitely something to make sure you educate yourself on. There's a lot of resources out in the market to be able to do that.
We tell our customers or potential customers to get multiple bids, to ask for references, to check the references, but then we don't apply that to our relationships with our vendors. So I think Tony's point is accurate here. Interview several agencies, ask them for referrals that are your size, preferably in your industry, and actually double check with those people. To say, hey, and ask them, do you know anybody else that also uses this firm or this agency? And we need to apply the same principles we're asking our clients to apply to our businesses as well.
This is true.
Yep. And ask your peers in the industry. There's a lot of really great industries, and I've seen some incredible work done by a few of them that kind of really, helps.
Yeah.
And some people specialize in fence. Some people do only fence marketing.
Yeah.
Those are the type of people that probably have a slight advantage, and you'll be able to get some good referrals for and from too. Now, Tony, I really want to tee you up on this one, because I hear you talking about this almost till you're blue in the face lately. In your own words, you like to keep things simple. You're not a complex guy. You don't love to mess around with technology, and it's not like your best friend, but at the end of the day, like, you understand the importance of it to growing a business. And I just kind of want to let you go on this one for a second before we move to the next bullet points, and just hear your overall thoughts on what you've seen in the industry and kind of the effects it can have on a business.
Well, I tell you, the technology, the business technology that we have for our industry in today's time, if we had had that back in my early career, wow. I mean, wow. I'm an old school guy, I like to do it on paper. I like to do it with a pen. Okay. Yeah, I know how to do it in a computer, but when softwares are being developed and platforms are being developed that keeps it simple and follows the process of what a fence contractor is looking for to be able to do it, that's when it's powerful. And yes, every consult I go on, every summit that we train, we've got a complete, chapter on business technology and what it will do to enhance your operation. And there's several key components, for that business technology to help you out. We need a good pre-qualifying software once you get to a certain point. We need a great estimating package that, and me, I want to sell it while I'm there. I don't want to go back to the office and put it together. I want software that can do the estimate. I want to be able to say, Miss Jones, can we get you on the schedule in 2 weeks? This is my next opening. I'm not asking for the contract. I'm asking to get it on the schedule. So, softwares like that will enhance your opportunities, minimize your time, which is important to all of us, especially those with families. Okay. You guys are chasing kids. I'm chasing grandkids, right? So again, the pre-qualifying, the estimating, and then some type of workflow process. Okay, something that we can put here when it started, where we can watch it go through, that has some level of automations that keeps the communication going to the customer, and you not having to sit there at 5 a.m. in the morning typing an email out every day. And then, of course, the accounting piece is huge to me, and all of this needs to be some level of integration that will help help your company be more efficient. Again, I've said it several times. If you're efficient, you're more profitable. But without these components, you're not going to be able to do it. And yes, I'm an old school guy, but yes, I have wrapped my arms and embraced the technology that we have. And there's more platforms and opportunities out there now than our industry's ever had. And every fence contractor, no matter start out or massive size, needs to be looking at some type of technology that can help them enhance their operation.
Technology helps you scale. I think that's an important takeaway, is that I'm not, I'll start sounding like my dad here. Back in my day when we were doing it by hand, we capped ourselves at 4 proposals a day, 4 in-person proposals. That way we could give time to talk to the customer without rushing away. We could prepare it on site. We could hand it to the customer. To Tony's point, we could ask for the sale, or ask for the sale in person while we're there. And we didn't want it to be rushed. So about 4 a day felt about right, because we're also driving across town and this sort of thing. Now we've implemented technology, right? One of the bullet points here is we use pre-qualification software, so that, Tony, how many times did you go to a house and you measure it, you give a great presentation, and you knock it out of the park, and they go, it's how much? Oh, wow. I thought it'd be half that. It's done at that point. There's that gap is too far to bridge. To try to find a financing. It's too far. They're done. They're out of the process. And now you look back, and you're like, by the time we hit drive time and prep time and this, I'm out an hour and a half maybe. Pre-qualification software takes all that out, right? So we're done with that portion of it. But we can reliably and consistently put out about 7 or 8 proposals a day now with technology. So now I understand part of this conversation is you do have a lower close rate. Okay, like that. But if we double our inputs and only have a slight drop in conversions, that leads to more business, right? There's some simple math involved here that says, okay, well, we're still closing more projects per day now than we did in the past. And that is purely thanks to technology.
And it's data that's got to be kept up with. Okay, so how many phone calls that came in, the initial calls that came in, how many did the admin assistant take, and how many did they assign? So back in my early years, when I was sales manager and operations manager of a large fence company there in Mississippi, we had 5 salesmen. All right, so now 5 salesmen times 4. Okay, in the old school days, you figured out. Now, if they have the technology, look at how many more we can get to. We're going to close the gap now. Maybe I knock off at 4 o'clock instead of having to work to 6 o'clock. We got a better work-life balance because technology's offered us that opportunity. And everything's in the cloud. Everything's available to anybody to access, okay? You talked about a cloud back in my day. We'd have looked up at the sky. We know what the cloud service is for us now, right? So, again, I think that every fence company, and I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of letting the cat out of the bag, but this is one of the 7 strategies that is coming out in my book. Business technology is a main play piece of being a successful fence company.
Well, and Joe talked about pre-qualification, and I recommend, my salesmen personally. I'm happy to talk about them even on things like this. They're great people in the industry. They do tremendous work. They have the top tier product that I'm aware of. And I'll tell you if you don't, because I'm a technology guy, I'm critical of technology. And I think my salesman is as good as it gets. So I always tell people, just if you could hire an employee, Joe, for $175 a month, and they would pre-drive to every job, measure it, get a verbal agreement from a homeowner that's within their budget for then a project manager to go out and actually do a takeoff and stuff on, you'd hire that person in 1 second if they cost you $175 a month. I mean, that's nothing. And technology is the cheapest employee you can kind of get.
Yeah, for less than a day, for less than a day's wages. I mean,
yeah, literally. I mean, and that's a month, and you're getting thousands or hundreds of leads running through that thing, and they're all times day or night. If people shop at night nowadays, when they're, like you said, put kids to bed, they scroll, watch a video. If they want to get a quote, you're not going to answer your phone at 11 o'clock at night to give them a quote, but my salesman will, so it's a handy thing. Now, Joe, this is something that I talked to you about and you talked to us about recently, is handling debt incorrectly. Now, we've got a couple, basic bullet points and stuff that you gave us along with a quote, but could you mind just kind of expanding for the larger group around how to use debt? Because debt isn't always bad.
It's not.
It just depends on
but there's a hesitation in general when we talk about debt because it can be misunderstood, right? It can be, in the quote, it could be, someone could say, well, I heard a guy say the way to scale is to take on debt, when that was about a thimbleful of the conversation I had was that debt, if used correctly, can help scale a business, right? It's not necessarily brand new trucks right away. It's not necessarily a brand new facility right away. It's not necessarily a whole new rig worth of tools right away, right? Like, now, the truck and the tools can be part of the conversation because they do help generate revenue as long as it makes sense, right? If it's a tool you use once a year, let's not go buy that. Let's rent that, right? Because until we can justify the cost and all that. But if you have, to Tony's point earlier, if it's on paper, if you have a budget, if it makes sense to say, I'm going to take out a small piece of debt because on paper, if I buy a second truck and I put a team in that truck, we can produce more work. It will help us grow the company. Yes. If it's, I want to buy a brand new truck for me because I think it'll look great, but I can't tie additional revenue to it, that's probably not a great use of debt, right? Like that's why I don't talk about that a lot on my show, because I feel like it can be misconstrued, right? And I don't want it to be taken the wrong way. Like there needs to be a serious thought process involved before you take on debt, because that's one of the ways we see contractors get in trouble, right? They take on debt because they don't have, they're, for a myriad of reasons, they just don't have the funds to maybe pay vendors or to whatever the reason. And then they get really caught up on it. We saw a guy do this here in our market a couple years ago, just get so twisted up, and he took on a lot of debt, and then he ended up, he took a lot of deposits and tried to run off with them, right? And so then he had vendors mad, he had banks mad. So now I get to deal with that fallout when I go talk to customers about taking a deposit. Luckily, I've got a great relationship with my bank, so that didn't affect my banking relationship. But now, anytime a new fencing contractor walks through the doors of a bank, they're going to go, ooh, I remember this industry.
Yeah.
I remember when he stuck that bank with almost 7 figures worth of debt, right? So it can be used.
Joe,
I was just going to say, the key thing here is if you tie it to revenue, and the revenue generated can make the debt service payment, that's when I'm okay with it, right? As long as there's been a tremendous amount of thought, weeks worth of thought. Not tremendous isn't, I spent a whole hour thinking about this, and
really.
Right? Tremendous is kind of one of those ambiguous words, but as long as it's to Tony's point earlier, it's on paper. We've got a budget. This fits within the debt service payment, falls within the budget, and we can tie revenue to it. We can increase revenue, and the increased revenue that makes the debt okay. Like, we can talk about that, but
another piece that you can add to that, again, this is the keep it simple, stupid Tony way. Okay, if I'm going to buy something, purchase, go into debt, will it generate revenue? Okay, not only do I have enough revenue and gross margin to pay for that debt, but will it help me generate more revenue? Yeah. And I think that a lot of people get in trouble in the fact that, I'm status quo, I'm making great money, I'll go buy these 2 new trucks, I got these 2 new salesmen out here, and then all of a sudden we're not generating additional revenue, and now we're going down instead of up, right? We're not scaling up, we're scaling down. So again, if you're going to go into debt, and I'm with Joe, okay? I mean, if you're raising kids and you're growing a company, you're going to have, you can't go the Dave Ramsey pathway all the time as much as we'd like to. So at the end of the day, if you're going to go purchase, if you're going to go in debt, make sure that whatever you're doing, Bobcat, beaver digger, new truck, whatever the tool may be, is going to help you generate revenue. And that is, in my opinion and Joe's opinion, an okay method.
Yeah. And
Yep. And I hear that all the time because we work with a lot of growing, scaling companies, and they'll be like, we just did all this, that, and the other thing, and expand things out. And sometimes it's well thought out, and other times it's a knee-jerk reaction, and those knee-jerks are spooky. I don't like
the new facilities are the thing, or the new trucks, right? To say, well, so you just replaced something you already had, but now you have an additional payment, and you really don't get additional revenue from it, right? You went from a 4,000 square foot facility to a 6,000 square foot, so you got a little bit more space, but you doubled or tripled what your monthly lease payment or ownership, whatever it is. Are you going to triple revenue? I doubt it, right? Like, I really seriously doubt it. But anyway, I spend a lot of time talking about this because it scares me to death that people are going to take the wrong snippet of, they're going to listen to only a part of this and then take out debt. Now, if you've crossed that hurdle, if you have absolutely convinced yourself that you can tie revenue to it, it flows in the budget, it's paid for, all of that, the next step is, there are some good resources out there, right? So we've got SBA is a good option when paired up with your bank. You need to have a great banking relationship to begin with. The best time to start the lending relationship is before you need lending. Meet with a banker, let them know your business, let them know, hey, here's what I'm thinking. 6 months from now, I think I want to scale a little bit. I think I want to add another truck. I think I want whatever it is. And 6 months from now, a year from now, what do we need to do? What do we need to do right now to get you guys really good and comfortable with me, with my business, with the road we're on, before we even have the lending conversation? You start a conversation like that and you'll blow your banker away, because they are used to people coming through the door that say, I need a loan and I need it now. Ooh, right. So bankers' life is to mitigate risk, right? They need to lower risk. That is their livelihood, is making sure they have the least amount of risk possible. So think about it. If you had somebody come to you and say, hey, Tony, listen, I really need about $500 and I could use it today. Would you mind but I'm good for it. Like, I'll definitely get you back, but I really could use it right now. Whoa, wait a minute. No, like, this doesn't sound good. Like, why do you need it? And red flags go up, right? But if you come to your banker ahead of time, here's my plan, here's my books, here's my business.
Yep.
I think I want to scale. Here's how I think I want to do it. Ask for advice. Right? Here's what I think I need, and here's why I think it will work. What do you think? You have a lending partner in this, you'll do well. And typically, so you don't go directly to the SBA either, right? So you do need a banking relationship before the bank then goes to the SBA and secures the lending, or whatever the situation is. But it starts with that first banking relationship.
Yep, 100%, 100%. Now, we kind of touched on this right away, but it's something that is very difficult for people to actually do. And Tony, I'll start with you on this one, but we talk about the fear of letting go, of control. Control is really the name of the game here. And it's like, I know I can build the fence better than Johnny, so I need to watch Johnny. Or I know that I'm the best sales guy on my team, so Billy's not going to go do all my sales. I'm going to keep doing my sales. Like, whatever that may be, right? But at the end of the day, there's one of you. Right? You can't do everything in a $10 million business if that's what your goal is. So how do you give advice on people hiring, training, retaining talent, getting people to the point where you can trust them and let go of that business?
I think hiring is a 24/7 process. I mean, back in my day when I was operations manager, I go through the Wendy's drive-through, and this guy looks like he's bored, but he was impressed me with his communication skills and his willingness to try to help me. Hey, you ever thought about being in the fence business? I mean, honestly, we're hiring 24/7. You've got your circle of friends, family friends, church friends, your workout friends, whatever the case may be. You've got a circle of people that you need to reach out to and be asking all the time, hey, do you know anybody? I need to fill these positions. Yeah, we've got all the Indeeds and we've got all these other opportunities to put things out there. But a lot of times we just need that close relationship to our circle of people to really help us grow. And if you get one good one, guess what? He's got 3 good friends, right? And they're all going to have opportunities to have those conversations. I tell from a hiring perspective, start young, try to get into the high schools, try to talk to the coaches where these football players, baseball players, these athletes are needing something to do for the summer, and then all of a sudden you introduce them to a whole new world of, construction and things that's going on in the fencing industry. And all of a sudden this guy turns into a full-time employee. That's what happened to me after, I got through cutting grass that day. But once you hire a good employee, okay, that's the toughest part. Let's just give it that. Hire the right people. You've got to provide them the right resources and train them, okay? And yeah, I don't want to let go, but I've got to train this guy until I feel confident that he or she can do the job. So training is the next step with the proper resources to where I can, again, set the expectations to where I can hold them accountable. And if you're investing in them by sending them to classes, to schools, to other training opportunities, even in your local area, you're going to retain that employee. So it truly is hire, train, and retain. And it works brilliantly, but you've got to have that culture and you've got to have that one-on-one time with those employees to know what they're thinking, what they're feeling. And it's not all about the money. I've got statistics that'll tell you, these guys want to feel appreciated. They want a pat on the back. Some guys you got to kick in the shin, you got to give them a cuss word, or you got to just say thank you for being here, but you have to manage your people differently. But hire is the toughest piece. But once you've hired somebody, try to train them, give them the resources to get them up to speed, set the expectation, hold them accountable because that's what they want. And then you're going to be able to retain them. And every now and then it takes twice as much money to train somebody as it does to try to maintain and give them resources and train them, right? So if we have a turnover all the time, we're just spinning our wheels and we're never going to make good money. The best way to attract good talent is you've got good talent in your operation. I mean, ask those people, hey, do you have somebody like you? You're a sales phenomenon. Do you have anybody that that you may work out with or do something with that possibly be interested in doing this, even part-time? You've got to use your resources that you have. And so many people look outside, their own internal team. Now, I understand small companies are tougher, but as you get larger, Joe's got resources that he can say, hey, we need to add this or we need to do that, So I really think that, bringing in the right resources, training the right people, setting those expectations is the key. And they want to feel good about where they're at, what they're doing, and feel a part of engagement. Ask them what their opinions are. I think that's real important. A lot of fence companies say, I'm the boss, I'm doing it this way, and I don't ask anybody's any opinion. If you want to retain employees, you better be getting their opinion, their input, because they're only going to help you grow because they see things that you as an owner don't.
We had that talk last month. We do a Final Friday lunch where we get everyone around the table and we all break bread and we talk about the month we had and the month we're getting ready to have and all that. So, one of the things I said is, hey guys, we need to add someone up front in the office. And we need to add 2 people to the shop just because we're looking, to Tony's point earlier, we're looking at our budget, we're looking at our forecast. We need to hire on 2 people for here. So, and I said, look around this table, look at everybody here. We need 2 more people to look like these people, right? Not look like these people, but emulate these people because we've got a great team. Listen, if we could duplicate ourselves, we would just do that, right? But we can't do that.
Yeah.
So who do you know that looks like those folks at this table or acts like these people at this table?
Mm-hmm.
So, in one thing I think we've had to pivot away from hiring and into recruiting, right? And these are 2 different things. So we still hire, right? We're running Indeed ads right now. We do that. But we also understand that the key players, the aces out there, the rock stars, they're already somewhere else. So we need to try to recruit them to our team somehow. And to Tony's point, it's not always money. It can be benefits, it can be work-life balance, it can be whatever it is, right? But we do need to recruit them. so that we are bringing on aces and we are bringing on rock stars at whatever position we're looking to fill. Recruiting is a huge part of that. And just in my point with marketing, you need to recruit before you need the people, right? And this,
Yes.
I will be honest, this is something we haven't done well in our business. We have noticed the need, and then we've tried to recruit and hire for that need. I should have had this conversation 2 months ago, saying, guys, in March and April, we need to bring another couple team members on. Who do you know? Let's grab lunch with them. Let's start talking about, because the recruitment is a longer process than hiring, right? Yep. So we need to, anyway, something we haven't done super well, so something we're working on right now ourselves.
And I think some mistakes a lot of company owners make is, okay, I'm not hiring right now, and all of a sudden this phenomenal resource comes available, right? I mean, if there's a resource that's talking to you about going to work for you and you don't have a spot for them, we're going to make a spot, okay? Because I'm not going to pass up this great resource, this great person that potentially could fill a gap that I'm needing. And all of a sudden we're scaling 10, 12% in a particular area, and now I'm paying for it twofold, right? So when talent comes along, be nimble enough to hire that individual, put them in a place, give them some responsibilities, and make it happen. So don't say, "Oh, I'm not hiring at this time." Man, be nimble. Make
a lot
it
of
happen.
times it's the chicken and the
those resources only come along once every now and
then. A
then.
lot of times it's the chicken and the egg, right? Do we hire the people and then build the business to pay for those people, or do we build the business first and then hire for that position, or do we hire that position and then build the business to their skill set? And both of those are right. Yep. Right. There's not a right and a wrong here. Yep. But to your point, Tony, if you have someone walk through and go, this person is a key player, they're an ace, they're a rock star, let's create an environment where they can flourish, because then the business will be better for it.
Absolutely.
Yep. And that's, old school methodology may have been more the latter, Joe, where you build the business case, you get the revenue, then you put the person in place and they're already paid for. But with the labor market the way it is, and finding employees as difficult as it is, that's forced a lot of people to change that mentality. And it's really made them be a little more proactive, because you can't be reactive. Just like your point is, like, it may take you weeks or a month or longer to find the right person. And sometimes you can't afford that. So a month can be a long time. So kind of putting everything we talked about together, just because we're bumping up against time a bit, but I want to give us some time here too. A couple of things to remember from things we talked about today, like don't neglect the business side of things in favor of the excitement of starting or running or being in your company. Marketing effectively is your first step to success. Make sure you have a marketing plan in place and understand that sometimes paid advertising can be a smart bet. It's more instant, than a lot of like SEO and the more slow burn type marketing. But at the end of the day, you stop paying and then that marketing goes away. So make sure that you understand it. So you're not just throwing money at the wall to get a lead and then you stop throwing money and the leads stop coming, because that's no fun either. Use advancements in technology to make business more profitable, produce better experiences, use debt wisely, and hire and train people, the right people, right? Any just thoughts from you guys on these last couple bullet points here?
I got one comment that you used in bullet point number 3 there, the customer experience. I don't think that we put enough focus on that. Okay. We might've been 10 or 15% higher, but if they had a great customer experience with that guy in the orange shirt, they're going to buy. I mean, that's just the way it is. And every consult I go to, you can raise your prices by 10 or 12%, and you go ahead and tell them from a pre-qualifying standpoint, you're going to be higher than anybody else. They're expecting that when you show up. And if you've done your pre-qualifying properly, you know that you have an opportunity when you get there. But the customer experience, communication, being on time, not delaying, doing everything that you said, if you do a great customer experience, they're going to buy, in my opinion. And I think that we need to put more emphasis on that from every aspect of our business.
What about you, Joe? What's one key takeaway you can share here?
Completely agree with that. I absolutely agree with the first point. So don't jump into it just because you're so excited about starting a new business. Or I think the worst reason you could start a business is because you're just dissatisfied with your current position. That's not a great reason to start a company. But you can. So to the second point, marketing effectively is your first step to success, and you can do both at the same time, right? So when I was younger, you would generally see guys that started out on the weekends and evenings building fence, and then building up a business, and then when that business scaled enough where they couldn't afford to keep their main job, then they stepped into that full time. it seems like in the last several years that's gone by the wayside, right? There's been less of that and just more straight into business. I think the slow burn is essential to this, where you start doing it on the side, you start marketing it on the side. I mean, marketing right now, guys, it's not the lights in this camera in the studio, right? It's a cell phone where it's, hey guys, Joe Everest for those Ark fans. I'm out here at this job, you know, da 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 da. That's on a weekend, right? That's in addition to your normal job, so that when you do step into this business, you are stepping into a business, not just an additional job. You're not working for yourself rather than working for someone else. You are actually working in a business you've built.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and I really appreciate all the insight and stuff you guys shared today. A lot of it was excerpts from the book that you guys helped contribute to begin with. So highly encourage everybody watching and listening at home or in the office to download the book and look at it. It just takes all the same 5 topics we discussed and it kind of expands on them, giving you guys a little more actionables and a little more data behind some of it. Just so you guys know, the Ark Site, or the webinar today, was presented by Ark Site. That's obviously where I work. And we focus on that on-site experience, drawing, estimating, that sort of thing. We do have a couple like free promotions and things you guys can jump onto. Those are also in the handout section there too. And don't skip those resources. They're a big piece. They have all of this sort of stuff in a real digestible format. Download them, keep them, share them with your team members, share them with your peers, anybody who you think may benefit from them. And I just want to thank you guys again for your time today, Tony, Joe. It's been a pleasure. You guys have been awesome. Tons of content. I know we planned for a little bit shorter of a webinar. Totally didn't happen. I don't think it ever happens when we get together, but that's totally fine. It was a lot of great content that we didn't want to skip any over. So a little longer than anticipated, but it worked out great. So really appreciate you guys' time. And yeah, no, anytime. I appreciate everybody attending. Check out the resources. And like I said, if we didn't get to your question during the session, we'll make sure that we get to it via email or another medium to contact you guys.
Very good. I appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. Thanks again, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye.